The losses in life and property kept growing today in the wake of Sandy. The U.S. death toll reached 92, and the focus on physical damage shifted to New Jersey, where the monster storm blasted barrier islands and other waterside cities. The massive force of the storm's destruction along the Jersey shore came fully into view today. Town after town presented stark scenes of wrecked homes and boats, underscoring the long process of rebuilding that lies ahead. One of those towns was the Long Beach community north of Atlantic City, where Army National Guard troops arrived to assist.
A lot of devastation. The island was hit very hard. From what I understand, there's roughly 18,000 homes without power. There's severe gas leaks, so right now we're just trying to get everything together for the Office of Emergency Management here and the different municipalities and just assist in whatever needs they have going on.
And even 3 days later, some Long Beach residents still could not believe the power of the storm.
This was the deepest water I've ever seen in my lifetime of being here. I was 11 in the 62 storm, and the water came an inch from our house, and this time it was a foot deep in our house.
In Point Pleasant, the damaged boardwalk was a backdrop for workers who carried lumber and dug holes for new fencing. And shelters like this one at the Brigantine Beach Community Center were open for those searching for a place to stay.
Even though we don't have any staff here, we've had incredible support from all the volunteers.
To the north, in Hoboken, across from New York City, emergency and National Guard trucks moved through the flooded streets overnight. When Sandy hit, the storm surge on the Hudson River swamped a quarter of the city, leaving 20,000 people stranded in their homes and in the dark.
It's really scary. We don't have that much food. I mean, we prepared a little bit.
For others across New Jersey, the loss of electricity meant no way to pump gas, which led to long lines at places where fuel was available.
An hour and 40 minutes almost. Crazy. I'm out of gas though. I have less than a quarter tank, so I had to get out today.
And Governor Chris Christie said today the storm also delivered an emotional blow. He spoke from the flooded town of Moonachie.
There's nothing more precious to people than their homes. Homes are where their families are, the memories and possessions of their lives. And there's also a sense of safety to home. That you feel like when you get in that place and you close that door, that there's a sense of safety there. That sense of safety was violated on Monday. With water rushing into people's homes at an enormous rate of speed. And people having to literally swim, climb, jump for their lives.
And financial help was on the way. The federal government promised 8 New Jersey counties it would cover all costs for emergency power and transportation for another week. Meanwhile, in New York, new images from Long Island showed tons of sand washed ashore by the storm and major damage to beachfront neighborhoods. At the same time, a return to heavy city traffic early today was a sign of progress. Police tried to manage the situation by turning away cars with fewer than 3 passengers on select bridges into Manhattan. Mayor Michael Bloomberg pressed for people to be patient with the traffic and the broader effort to get back to normal.
We're all in this together. We are desperately trying to help everybody. We're trying to prioritize. First thing is safety. Inconvenience is down the list. If we had some people in the wrong places, it was the first day getting it going. Hopefully it'll be better tomorrow. You have to bear with us.
Still, city officials warn that gridlock was likely to linger through the day and into the weekend as the public transportation system comes back online. 14 of New York's subway lines resumed limited service this morning. Fares were waived today and tomorrow to encourage people to use mass transit.
I walked about 5 miles in total yesterday to and from work, so I'm happy to have the subways back for the time being.
But for these commuters outside the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, the subway still wasn't an option. Instead, long lines stretched around the block as people waited for buses to shuttle them into Manhattan. Things were looking up, though, for air travelers. LaGuardia Airport reopened today. That meant all 3 major New York area airports are now up and running, albeit not yet at full speed.
Now to some on-the-ground reports from both states on how people are coping with the aftermath. Ray Suarez begins with 2 dispatches from the embattled state of New Jersey.
We turn to Mike Schneider, the managing editor and anchor of New Jersey Today. He's at their studios in Montclair. Mike, is it really starting to dawn on people now just how badly the state was hit?
I think so, Ray. The fact is that you go through this kind of psychological roller coaster as the storm approaches and people gear up for what they believe is coming. Then they live through the actual event itself. And then the next day or so, they get outside and they take a look around and they realize exactly what has happened. In this case, there was no way to anticipate what was going to happen because the destruction on this level has never occurred in this state before. It's the worst storm in the history of New Jersey and, according to some people, maybe in fact one of the worst storms ever to hit the United States.
How are the people in the worst damaged areas managing to get the basic necessities of everyday life, food, shelter?
It's tough, and it varies. I mean, in some of the more urban areas, you've seen swift boat crews actually go out, rescue these people, and take them to shelters where they will be fed, and they'll have a place to sleep. And, you know, depending upon what level of shelter they go to, they might be able to get home sooner rather than later. But at this point, if you're from the barrier islands, the ones that were hardest hit down the shore, Governor Christie had issued an executive order telling everybody to get off the beach, his famous phrase. Some people didn't, much to the governor's consternation, and in fact, they were kind of trapped there right now. Some of them have been rescued as well. The governor at this point is talking about lifting some of the travel bans in some select communities. Curfews remain in effect in all those communities, however. But for many of these people, it's a case of getting to family or friends or shelters and hoping that those necessities will be there for them at that place.
Was today the day when a lot of people really got to take stock of just what they had lost, their first look at their homes?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, Ray, because so many people in the state don't have power. It's hard to say how many people know exactly how widespread this damage has been. Governor Christie took a tour yesterday of the more of the inland areas before his encounter with President Obama, and he went to a town called Sayreville, where he went door to door, meeting with the people who came out to talk to him, shake hands. He was bolstering their spirits, but in some cases, there were people who broke down in his arms and cried. And he became, more than the chief executive of this state, he became the consoler-in-chief, if you will. And that is a story that repeated itself a number of times. Later in the day, the governor and President Obama took a helicopter ride over the area from Atlantic City down to an area called Brigantine, ultimately. One of the areas where the governor had told people to get off, and in many cases they didn't. And he kind of jokingly but firmly let them know when they were speaking a couple of minutes after the video you're seeing right now, let them know that, in fact, he was not happy with them, but he'd give them a break this time around. But it's just a very, very kind of like, this is it's not a big state geographically, but it's a very densely populated state, and it's a very diverse state when it comes to geography as well. The highlands took a tremendous hit because that's where the winds seem to be the strongest, and trees came down, and power is out there, and there's no telling when it'll be restored. Along the shore, of course, you've seen some of the damage that occurred there. Where once stood houses, there are now waves in some cases. And then you go up farther north, closer to New York City, across the Hudson from that, and you have places like Jersey City and Hoboken, places that are populated now with an awful lot of people. In fact, those two cities have been referred to as the most densely populated areas in the United States, and they were underwater. They simply did not expect that level of damage and destruction to come their way. And for a lot of those people, they had to be boated out as well. There's no telling when they can go back.
You touched on it just briefly before, but I want to talk a little bit more about the restrictions, because often post-flood areas are dangerous to be in. There are things in the water that you can't see. The houses themselves have gas leaks, sometimes electricity problems. Are there tight controls on who can get in, who can get out, and how long they can stay?
Absolutely, Ray. In some of these communities, the restrictions remain in effect. No getting on, no getting off. In some places, the governor didn't even have to issue that order. Bridges are out in a number of communities as well. But in some of the video you're seeing behind me right now, they've had some enormously dangerous encounters with gas leaks. Just this afternoon, one of the gas companies, New Jersey Natural Gas, announced that it was cutting off the gas flow to that area to try to stem some of those fires. As a result, I presume that means some people with gas service might lose that gas service for a while. But in places like the ones you're seeing behind me right now, there are no people who could use the gas service there because no people basically could stay there. You're taking a look at places that were lovely beachside communities, bayside communities, and now they're basically houses lifted off their foundations and surrounded by the beach.
Michael Schneider is with us from New Jersey. Nighttime temperatures dropping tonight, Michael, so it's probably going to be pretty cold for those people trying to shelter in their homes. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ray.
And next, we go to Katie Zesma of the Associated Press. We're talking to her by phone in Hoboken, New Jersey, because we couldn't get studio facilities there. Katie, unlike the shore communities that we've seen so much of, Hoboken is a densely populated place, built up, high-rises. What's it like there?
Well, the floodwaters have receded in Hoboken. The streets are completely dry right now, but the mayor estimates about 95% of the residents are still without power, and that power could take up to 7 to 10 days to get back, but FEMA officials are now here and working with the utilities, so they stress that it could be much sooner, and they want it to be much sooner than that.
There must be a lot of water in basements, in any place that's below ground level, though. There
is, yeah. There's a lot of damage, as there is all around New Jersey from rising waters. One other issue they have here in Hoboken is because there are a lot of high-rises. Many people, especially elderly people, stayed in their high-rises. So now that there's no power, they're not able to get back down. So there's a really concerted effort to get around to especially elderly housing complexes and deliver those people food and water and medicine as well. They have a few pharmacists and nurse practitioners going around to people and helping them get the medication they need if they're unable to get out of their home.
Aren't there towns very close to Hoboken, north and south on the Hudson River, that aren't as heavily affected?
There are. Jersey City is one. Jersey City did get water, but at least in the downtown area, much of the power is back already, and it's come back very, very quickly, and some of it actually came back yesterday. So, there are towns around that definitely are not as hard hit. They did not take on the amount of water that Hoboken did.
Let's head down the shore to Seaside Heights, where you've also done some reporting. What's it like there?
It's a scene of absolute devastation. It's a barrier island that holds Seaside Heights, Portly Beach, and a few other towns, and it is absolutely devastated. In Seaside Heights, there is a famous pier, a famous boardwalk. For years it has been used by families for summer vacation, and more recently it was made famous by MTV's Jersey Shore. The boardwalk is completely destroyed. There were a number of amusement park rides there. One at Casino Pier, the rides are completely gone. They're just not there anymore. And most dramatically, on the other side in the ocean, there is a massive roller coaster just bobbing in the waves.
A lot of the houses there are smaller frame structures. They seem to be off their foundations, moved around, scattered, crashed into each other. What's it like?
Absolutely. There is a house that got pushed into the middle of Route 35, which is the main thoroughfare on the island. Next to it, the house is completely turned on its side, almost like a dollhouse would just be pushed over. Roofs are buckled in. There's debris in the lawns. Roofs are kind of sheared off, almost like a sardine can. They just kind of came off, and you can see them hanging there. There's been one very dramatic scene in Ortley Beach. When you come over the bridge, there is a red pickup truck that's just tabbed down into a sinkhole. It's really unbelievable to see this car sticking out of the ground.
Is anyone allowed to spend the night there, or is there a curfew in effect in Seaside Heights?
There is a curfew in effect. A number of people did ride out the storms, and officials are still going door to door and doing search and rescue efforts to see if there's anyone left in their homes. Those who were there are going to be asked to leave because there are still gas fires that are burning. There's still gas lines, and there's still power lines down, and a significant amount of damage. The people who did stay there, I actually spoke with one, and he said his exact quote was, "It was like being at ground zero. Just the water came in, the winds, the rain." He said it was, just completely frightening being there. And he walked over the bridge to get there because residents will not be allowed back until this weekend at the very earliest to gather all of their belongings and check on their homes.
Katie Zesma of the Associated Press, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we go back to New York. Hari Srinivasan is in Manhattan today, examining the impact the storm has had on businesses struggling with flooding and other damage.
It got what, to here? To here?
It got to about here.
Marco Passanella knows firsthand how high the water got in his wine store because he and his family rode out the storm in their apartment above.
We were down there, and all of a sudden we saw the kind of a sheet of water start to come through the front door, and within minutes it just bam opened up, and there was like 4 feet immediately. We ran upstairs, and then when we looked out the window, it was all of South Street was just like a black river. And, you know, it's scary.
The fear is gone, but he's left with the uncertainty of what will be covered by insurance as he tries to rebuild. He says it will cost him into the hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace everything in his store lower than 6 feet where the water crested. For his business, the timing could not have been worse.
We're entering the holiday season, and a wine and liquor store like ours can often have 60% of its yearly revenue in the last 2 months of the year. So this is going to hurt us hard.
Around the historic South Street Seaport neighborhood of Lower Manhattan, most of the businesses took a direct hit as the East River surged. Many of the walls will have to be replaced before mold and mildew can creep in.
Until they get power, until they get their electricity, until they clean out their systems, until they can get the Board of Health to take a look at the conditions and make sure everything is okay, it could take a couple of months.
Richard Berry helped develop the property, featuring nearly 100 apartments and a dozen small businesses. He says they still have to check to see if the buildings were moved by the river's surge. Now the concern is whether everyone was insured properly.
Water damage insurance, which you cover automatically, is not flood insurance. If water comes up, it's a flood. If water comes down, it's water damage.
No one yet has a good figure on Sandy's total damage, but it's been estimated to fall well into the tens of billions of dollars. Of that, more than $7 billion will be covered by insurance. As much as a third of those insurance claims could come from New York alone. Those costs keep bubbling upward each night as parts of the financial district and the city's transportation tunnels keep pumping millions of gallons of water out. And as night after night, a third of Manhattan Island remains without power, in the dark, and out of work.
Oh God, I mean, I have 30 employees out of work right now. And we probably won't be able to get everybody back to work for, another week or so. It's unfortunate.
David Trotta knows that those are paychecks that matter for the employees of Jack's Coffee, and he says they're sprinting as fast as they can to rebuild a sense of community by getting back to business.
So at some form, I would guess that myself and the old manager of this store will be out here with like a 6-foot table, a couple of burners, and some kind of camp set up, just making French press coffee tomorrow.
Just 3 days after Sandy, small signs of normalcy mean a lot for New Yorkers.
And there's more about the storm online. You can scroll through the images of the overwhelming scenes from the New Jersey coastline. Those are on our website.